Our next session is Steve Adelman, Tragic or Stupid Liability for Fans Falling Over Railings at Ballparks.
Hi, I'm Steve Adelman. I'm an attorney in private practice in Scottsdale, Arizona. What I'm going to talk about is largely the same topic that you just heard about. It's going to be a variation on the same theme. As it works out in my practice and what I tell people is my job is basically comprised of two things, detective and then storyteller. Well, I've already done the detective work, so today I'm going to tell you some stories. And there'll be stories ripped from the headlines. It's exactly the type of stuff that I do for a living, which is my practice is about mayhem at live entertainment events. So this is one particular example of the type of thing that happens when you combine open access to anyone who can buy or acquire a ticket. Often alcohol is involved and some distractions. So we're going to be talking about people falling over railings and how that relates to the legal standard of care. So this will be sort of a mini lesson in tort law for you. First, because I'm a lawyer in private practice, I'm actually going to give you a legal disclaimer. This way you can say, I definitely attended a law session, because you'll get a disclaimer from an actual lawyer. And just to be sure that you all get it, I'm going to read it out loud, and then I'm going to ask you a question, because this is participatory. So here goes. This is my famous legal disclaimer. So you can ask, did you hear the famous one? Yes. Although I'm an attorney, and a good one at that, this is not legal advice. You or your employer are not my clients, at least not yet. If you do want legal advice, you will have to get it the old-fashioned way, which is to pay for it. Excellent. That wasn't even the question. Here's the question. Because there's a camera running in the back of the room, please orally say if you believe you are about to receive legal advice. If you believe you're about to receive legal advice, say I. Oh, cut it out. It's always an outlier. Let the record reflect no one, other than one wag, thinks that they're going to receive legal advice. Good. You've gotten the famous legal disclaimer. Now we can begin. A venue's duty of care, this is very simple. I'm also a picture guy. A venue's duty of care is quite simple. One must, and listen to the words, okay? The words actually matter. In the law, words matter. In common conversation, people carelessly throw around words as if they don't, but in the law, they do. So listen carefully, because I took some time with this. Provide reasonably safe premises for reasonably foreseeable invitees engaged in reasonably foreseeable behavior. And there's no duty to warn of open and obvious dangers that you cannot reasonably eliminate. Is there anyone here who's picking up a theme, a word perhaps, that signifies something important? Reasonable, excellent. We have a front runner for student of the day. In tort law, the essence of the standard of care is that everyone has a duty to behave reasonably. Now, that everyone is worth emphasizing because it's not just the venue, it's not just the people who are providing services, food and beverage, for example. It's not just the promoter, it includes the patrons. When you go to an event, you also have a duty to behave like here's the legal term of art, a reasonable person under the same or similar circumstances. Now, let's apply that reasonable person standard to the situation that we're here to talk about, which is people tragically falling over railings. So, this is Shannon Stone falling over the railing at Rangers Ballpark in Arlington, Texas last summer. And I'll briefly digress. There is no privacy in the world anymore. Nothing happens that isn't recorded. Virtually everyone, I suspect everyone in this room has a smartphone or some device that has a camera on it, probably also with video. As a result, every tragic occurrence in public places is recorded for posterity. And the moment of greatest tragedy is often available to be turned into a still image and put into PowerPoint slides for your edification. So this is Shannon Stone falling over a railing. Now the reason I'm showing you this is so that you can see the railing. I'll give you a couple of facts. These are the detective parts, and then I'll get to the storytelling parts. Facts. I, a fabulous specimen of humanity, in excellent shape, I am 5 feet, just a shade under 10 inches tall. The late Shannon Stone was 6'3". And although I'm 170 pounds, he was considerably larger. So he's a big Texas guy. The railing that he is falling over in that image was 33 inches high. Now again, I being a 5'10" person, 33 inches high, I'm going to step over here just a little bit, 33 inches high is roughly mid-thigh on me. Again, I'm 5'10". For Shannon Stone, 6'3" tall, 33 inches high, that railing was just above his knee. Which is to say, and I'm going to step over here just a little bit again, which is to say, when he leaned over to catch a baseball tossed by outfielder Josh Hamilton at the end of an inning in order to give it to his son who is right next to him, when Mr. Shannon Stone leaned over to catch that baseball, his center of gravity, his body weight, was almost entirely above the top of the railing. What was that key word in tort law?
Reasonable.
Reasonable, excellent. Let's start with a question. Do you think, knowing nothing more than what I've just said, do you think that a 33-inch railing height in Texas, where people tend to be built big, do you think that a 33-inch railing height is reasonable?
No.
No. Why not?
Because you expect in a baseball game for people to want to lean out and catch these balls, so you have to take that into consideration.
You have to take into consideration that people will lean over at a baseball game. Yes?
You also have to take into consideration if someone's sitting down or they don't have the best view in their height where the railing is going to block their view. So you're there to watch a game, you're not there to catch a ball.
Excellent. You also have to balance that people want to have good sight lines. Guys like me, shorter, will be looking through a metal railing if it's set up to protect guys like him, who are taller. So that's exactly the competing issue. People will lean over, but you want to preserve sight lines. So when thinking about whether this is a reasonable railing height, we at least have competing demands for seated patrons at the ballpark. So we don't yet know whether this railing height is reasonable. Let's add another fact. The fact is the 33-inch railing height at that particular location met code, the International Building Code in particular. I will tell you with great confidence that although I have not been to every professional sports venue, I will tell you with great confidence that all of the major ones meet code. Because there are code officials who inspect these things, and engineers who inspect them, and architects who design them. And so the railing height at Rangers Ballpark was vetted and inspected over and over and over again. I am 100% certain, I know this to be true anyway, but I'm 100% certain that not only does that railing meet code, but at every other professional ballpark, it too meets code. What do you now want to know if the question always revolves around reasonableness?
Is the code reasonable?
Is the code reasonable? Excellent. Do you want to know where the code comes from? Anyone?
Yes.
Good. Then I will satisfy your curiosity and tell you that I put it up on the screen. This is the source of the 26-inch railing height requirement. So Shannon Stone fell over a 33-inch, I should put my hand where it belongs. Shannon Stone fell over a 33-inch high railing. The height requirement code actually was 26 inches where he was. Where does that 26-inch requirement come from? Does this have a light on it?
Yeah, right in the middle.
Oh, cool. This is the building exits code from September 11, 1929? 1929? The railing height requirement in 2011 originated in 1929 and was never changed? We just heard a presentation about how people are getting, bigger bottoms. I agree with that. Aren't they also getting taller? Now, do you think that it's reasonable to meet code and stop there if code is based on a 1929 height requirement? Some people are saying no. Now again, Rangers Ballpark at Arlington exceeded code. But at least when thinking about the source of code, you look back and it turns out to be 1929. Now, the reason I like your answer so much when you talked about sight lines, anyone here with a history background? I have a master's degree in history. Yes, excellent. What were the major forms of public entertainment back in the 1920s, if you know?
Vaudeville, baseball,
Vaudeville, that's indoors.
some baseball.
Some baseball. Baseball's a pretty new public entertainment.
Theater.
Theater, music, opera. Things where people sit. Nobody stands and leans forward at the opera. Sight lines are key. And so the 1929 building height requirement was made for smaller people who were doing different things than people do at the ballpark. And so when looking to answer the question, is meeting code synonymous with being reasonable, because that's what tort law requires, that you behave like a reasonable person under the same or similar circumstances, does code equate to reasonable? Arguably not. And of course, what do lawyers do? Argue. Yes. So, let's continue. Does it help if there is signage? This picture was taken from a ballpark where 2 people fell over the railings in the same year because it was hot and people got faint. Does adding signage make it seem more reasonable to have a railing of just over code required height? Does signage help? Bring you closer to reasonableness? Okay? Personally, I agree with that. This is an excellent article. I recommend it to everyone. It was written by a really smart guy. You can see that right there. I know him very well. I'm a huge Red Sox fan. So this is an article that I wrote for the cover of the NFPA journal, National Fire Protection Association. NFPA puts out something called the Life Safety Code, which in my line of work, if you're thinking about safety at live entertainment venues, the Life Safety Code is a very, very important book. It's basically best practices for building design and operation. So I wrote an article about Fenway Park and the renovations that the management and ownership had done to update what was then a 90-year-old building that was not up to modern safety standards at all into a 100-year-old building that had been substantially renovated both for comfort and safety. So I recommend this brilliant piece of writing to you highly. It's also very well laid out and aesthetically pleasing. As a Red Sox fan, I take great personal pride in all the great work that was done at Fenway Park. Having said that, there are still some things that concern me, and I'm going to show one of them to you because it's on point for this discussion. So we were just talking about how signage helps bring one closer to reasonable. Again, you know what fans are going to do at a ballpark. You said it, and you're absolutely right. People will lean over to catch a ball because, God knows a baseball that says property of Major League Baseball is a precious thing, and you must have one, even at the cost of putting your life and limb in peril. And so there's signage. This is a view. Well, does anyone know where this is a view from? Can you tell? Yes. Excellent. The top of the Green Monster. Good for you. So this is from the monster seats. Anyone know how high the green monster is?
37 feet.
38 feet. Very good. So close enough. So 38 feet is the height of the wall. And then the green monster seats are mounted on top of the wall. So people sitting in the green monster seats are more than 38 feet above the ground. So this is signage showing, warning, for your safety, please do not reach over wall, which of course is precisely what people will do. And we know that because, well, there are pictures and people do it all the time. So this image shows you a typical warm summer day in New England, and folks are doing what folks will do. Yes, they're wearing ski hats. They're leaning over to catch one of these precious balls. Hopefully this was a Red Sox home run, and somebody wasn't just prepared to throw a Yankee home run back into the field. So we know what people are going to do. It's precisely the opposite of what the signage says. So let's go back to the question of whether signage helps bring you closer to reasonable. If you know that people are generally not going to do what your signage says they should do, does the signage equate to reasonable conduct by the venue? It's getting harder, isn't it? Yeah, I think so too. So, and this is from my beloved Fenway Park. I would love to give you a correct answer saying they are doing it brilliantly there, but I don't know. Remember, I said there were few answers to this talk. Let me introduce you to Keith Carmichael of Kingman, Arizona. Anyone know anything about Kingman at all?
Not Brightspool.
I'm sorry?
Doesn't look too smart.
Doesn't look too smart. Well, I think that's right. Kingman is up in the far northwestern corner of Arizona. It's in the Mojave Desert, and it's home of rattlesnakes and survivalists. Anyway, Keith Carmichael of Kingman, Arizona went to Chase Field. It's where the Arizona Diamondbacks play. This was home run derby during the Major League Baseball All-Star game in 2011. And as you can see from this picture, he climbed up on the drink rail in the outfield trying to catch one of the special baseballs that they were using for home run derbies. So it's not just the ordinary white baseball that people also feel it's important to lean over and get, but he wanted one of the special ones, even though they're all going over the wall because it is, after all, home run derby. Everyone's hitting home runs. So he takes off his shoes and he climbs up on the drink rail. And does anyone know what happened next? Anyone remember?
Falling or catching him, or he's people pulling him up to catch a ball or some sort of
Baseball fan. I like you. Yes, that's exactly what happened. So he leans over and his friends catch him by the ankles. And Keith Carmichael of Kingman does not, in fact, die. He's not one of the tragedies in this little talk. Instead, a few minutes later, the cameras caught him kind of walking around, holding a drink. Oh, everything's great. Remember I said nothing is private anymore. Almost everything's captured on video. So obviously this is part of it. If you're going to become a lawyer, it really helps to be a skeptic. Is anyone skeptical about these images? Anyone see anything here that makes you wonder? Yes?
I don't know, it seems crazy.
Oh, it seems crazy. Anyone here disagree with that?
It seems like somebody is right next
Looks like
to
it was
the-
planned.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, look.
Planned?
They're laughing. The guy right there especially.
I can't tell if he's laughing or just kind of exerting himself, but it looks like it was planned. Why do you say that?
Why else would
Just
you
the
say
angles and then, yeah, just.
Somebody right next door, right next to the camera, right on the action. I don't know, it just seems odd.
I agree with that. I mean, I don't know. This is me speculating and doing so on video, but they're such perfect images, really close to him. Wouldn't you think, I mean, this sort of calls upon all of you to put down your own smartphones and be good Samaritans. Wouldn't you think that someone who's this close to a knucklehead, standing on the drink rail barefoot, clearly about to lunge for a flying baseball, wouldn't you think that someone would put down their smartphone and say, hey, knucklehead, get the hell off there? Or do something, Get someone from guest services. Do something. Don't just keep watching. So the speculation among my friends in Phoenix is that this was staged. But I don't know. Remember, what was that word, that really important word in tort law? Reasonable. Our friend Keith from Kingman. Reasonable? No. Because taking off your shoes and standing up on the drink rail is not what a reasonable person does at a live entertainment event. And so the venue has a duty of care to have railings that are of sufficient height for reasonably foreseeable conduct. Reasonably foreseeable conduct, which includes lunging for a baseball, but not stupidly standing in a place where you're completely exposed and virtually unprotectable. That behavior, arguably, because what we do is argue, that behavior is arguably not reasonable. And so the venue would not have a duty of care to protect him from himself because he, as the patron, has failed to behave as a reasonable person under the same or similar circumstances. Let's see what's next. So, handsome fellow there. There is no bright line in the law. There just isn't, particularly in tort law. We get to argue things. I personally find that very satisfying. I believe that there are very few hard and fast rules, rather there are opinions, or to borrow a line from the media, there are only shades of gray. I would say many more than 50, by the way. And so what one does in tort law is you try to tease out the different facts that are at issue in any set of circumstances, and you say, how does this fact fit with the standard of care, which is that one must behave as a what? Reasonable person. One must behave as a reasonable person. So how does each fact square with the duty of care to behave as a reasonable person under the same or similar circumstances? That's what we tort lawyers do for a living. Some sports and entertainment lawyers in private practice do intellectual property. I did some of that. I thought it was hard. Some of you have talked to me over the last day or so about becoming sports agents or agents for entertainers. I don't do any of that because I have a very low threshold for prima donnas, and I'm enough of one myself. I find tort law and the contract issues that go along with it intellectually satisfying because behavior is on a continuum of smart to crazy, and most things are somewhere in between. And we get to argue, because that's what lawyers do, about where in the continuum people's conduct is, and therefore has somebody met their legal duty of care or not. So that's what I do for a living in a nutshell. I hope that you found that interesting, and I've used up all of my time, but I'm not leaving, so if anybody wants to chat with me, either now or afterwards, come grab me. Thank you.
If you have one question or two, that's fine, but we're a little bit over time. So. I was going to ask one about the Pittsburgh Zoo example, where the mother puts the baby up on the railing. And at what point is that assumption of risk, and does the fan or the patron essentially contribute to their own injury?
I'll stay in the middle. The Pittsburgh Zoo example, I'll go back to the mic. That's what I should do. There, I'm compliant. The Pittsburgh Zoo example that you ask about is one of many where people do. I'm a father. To me, it's an example of really tragically bad parenting decisions. It's not the only one where somebody, puts a child up on a railing, to be a photo op, and then horrifically the child falls over, because that's what kids do. You have to be smart about this stuff. So, I show you the guy from Kingman, and we all get to giggle about it because he didn't get hurt. I try not to mock people who actually have tragic things happen to them. You know, those are teachable moments, and you don't mix your teachable moments with your comedy. That was just a tragedy. But what's the zoo supposed to do? Have a wall that goes all the way up? Well, maybe. Maybe that's the answer. You know, in hockey, that did become the answer because flying pucks fly. In baseball, you know, it has long been the answer that if you don't want to pay attention but do want to be close to the action, buy an expensive ticket and sit behind the screen behind home plate. Then you can talk to your neighbor as much as you want to without paying attention. But if you don't want to buy that expensive ticket behind the screen, watch the damn game. At least enough so you know if a ball is flying into the stands, you can either put up your hands or duck or, you know, pull your neighbor over so they get hit. You know, do something. So there is always that duty of care for patrons in the audience. And, you know, where on the continuum any particular behavior goes, that's a discussion over lunch. Yes?
Do you know if they're doing anything of updating the codes? I'm not sure if I'm missing out, but Texas Rangers also needs to be able for when they have the railings at the code and they raise them to 33, that's still doesn't prevent.
Yes. You ask a question and give an example.
Sorry.
So, no, it's fine. Your question was, is there any reevaluation of the minimum railing height in the International Building Code? The answer to that is yes. Code drafting is extremely laborious and time-consuming because so many experts are involved, which is why codes are so important, because they've been vetted and reviewed over and over and over again, which is why we all rely on them. It also makes code review very slow. So that was the answer to your question. What was the other part?
It was, well,
Oh, right.
doing this myself, and I know
At Rangers Ballpark.
Yeah.
Rangers Ballpark opened in 1994, I think. On opening night, a lady fell over the railing.
They had a couple.
And then, almost exactly a year before Shannon Stone fell, another man fell from an upper deck. Having said that, it certainly raises a question, is there a problem here? But in order to figure out the answer to that question, one has to look at each individual circumstance on its own merits and see what else was involved. It's not enough to say 3 instances over a nearly 20-year span, because other than those 3 instances, literally millions of people have attended baseball games at Rangers Ballpark without incident. So, you know, again, life being a continuum and tort law following that, do you think that reasonableness is indicated by the millions of people who have safely attended games without incident? Or do you think unreasonableness is indicated by the 3 people who fell? That's what we argue about. Yes?
One of the frustrations I had working in the facility was that architects design it, universities build it, and then venue professionals walk in the door and immediately they say, that's a problem, that's a problem, that's a problem. Don't you think a part of the whole foreseeability and reasonableness would be to include people from the venue management industry as part of the process?
Yes, that's an excellent question. I always believe that people who actually are going to use the building and who have experience using buildings should be involved at the design stage. It's analogous to part of my sales pitch for clients, which is most lawyers can read a contract. When you have a lawyer looking at your contracts in the live entertainment industry, you want someone who knows about the live entertainment industry. Otherwise, they're just going to tell you if your force majeure provision is legally enforceable, but not whether it covers the instances that you're going to deal with. Analogous to that, Janet Marie Smith, the architect who designed Camden Yards and was also involved in the Fenway Park renovations, she's not only a terrific architect and designer of very large public spaces with huge structural issues, but she's also knowledgeable about baseball stadiums. In fact, she's quite expert in that. Consequently, Camden Yards is not only beautiful, but it's user-friendly. The concourses are wide and it's open. That matters not only because it's pretty, but in the case of emergency egress, it's easy to get out of Camden Yards. And you can see, there are clear sight lines outside the concourses, you can see where you want to go, which is one of the most important things when doing an emergency evacuation. Can you see your path? So because she understood how these places are used in reality at an operational level, the buildings that she's worked on, of which I'm aware anyway, are particularly excellent buildings and they are usable in ways that some other spaces are not. Okay. Anyone else? Or have I exhausted you? The latter. Thanks again.